Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something real today. There comes a moment in a man's life when everything slows down, the noise quiets, the options fade, and for the first time, he ain't looking around anymore. He ain't distracted. He ain't wondering what if. That's the moment. That's the moment when a man decides she is the one. A man decides she is the one. When peace becomes more important than excitement. And this realization doesn't happen overnight. It comes after he's been tired of noise, tired of confusion, tired of emotional roller coasters that look fun at first, but leave him drained in the end. Early in life, a man thinks excitement is everything. He thinks loud, love, dramatic passion, and constant intensity means something is real. But life has a way of teaching lessons you can't skip. After enough disappointments, after enough chaos disguised as love, a man starts craving something different. He starts valuing calm. He starts paying attention to how he feels when he's not on edge. When a woman brings peace into a man's life, he may not recognize it right away. At first, it feels unfamiliar. There's no anxiety, no guessing games, no emotional whiplash. And because he's not used to that, it can even feel boring to him at the start. But then something happens. He notices he sleeps better. He notices his mind isn't racing. He notices he can focus on his goals without emotional distraction. That's when peace begins to reveal its power. Peace doesn't mean lack of passion. It means stability. It means knowing where you stand. It means not having to decode moods or walk on eggshells. When a man realizes that being with her doesn't cost him his energy, but actually restores it, that's when his mindset shifts. He stops seeing her as just another option and starts seeing her as a sanctuary. And a man will protect a place where he feels safe. This is the moment when excitement loses its grip on him. He understands that excitement fades but peace stays. He understands that chaos can be addictive, but it's also destructive. And suddenly the woman who doesn't yell, who doesn't manipulate, who doesn't threaten to leave just to be noticed becomes incredibly valuable. Her calm confidence stands out in a world full of emotional noise. A man decides she is the one when he realizes she doesn't disturb his life. She complements it. She doesn't compete with his purpose. She supports it. She doesn't drain him after a long day. She becomes the place he wants to return to. That feeling is powerful and it's rare. And when a man finds rare peace, he holds on to it. This decision isn't about butterflies. It's about balance. It's about choosing someone who makes life easier, not harder. When a man understands that love isn't supposed to feel like a battlefield, but like home, that's when peace wins over excitement. And in that quiet realization, without announcements or dramatic gestures, he knows a man decides she is the one when consistency in her behavior makes him feel safe instead of confused. And this kind of realization runs deep because confusion has exhausted him. Most men won't admit it out loud, but emotional inconsistency drains them more than anything else. One day everything feels good. The next day there's distance, silence, or tension with no explanation. Over time, that unpredictability teaches a man to guard himself. He becomes cautious, less expressive, and emotionally reserved. Not because he doesn't care, but because he's learned that caring without stability is risky. When a woman shows up the same way again and again, something inside a man relaxes. He doesn't have to guess her mood. He doesn't have to decode hidden meanings or overthink every interaction. He knows where he stands with her. That clarity creates emotional safety, and emotional safety is the foundation of commitment. A man can handle problems, disagreements, and hard conversations, but what he struggles with is uncertainty. Consistency removes uncertainty. This doesn't mean perfection. It means reliability. It means her words match her actions. It means when she says she cares, her behavior proves it. When she says she's there, she shows up. Over time, this steady presence becomes powerful. A man starts trusting not just her, but the situation itself. He stops bracing for disappointment. He stops expecting emotional shifts that come out of nowhere. And in that space, his guard comes down. Consistency also teaches a man that her love isn't conditional on his performance. He doesn't feel like he has to constantly impress her and her affection. He feels accepted for who he is, not just what he provides. That feeling is rare for a man, and when he experiences it, it leaves a lasting impression. It allows him to be himself without fear of emotional consequences. As this safety grows, his mindset changes. He begins to invest emotionally without forcing it. He starts including her in his thoughts, his plans, and his future because consistency has proven she's not temporary. He realizes that she's not there to create emotional chaos or keep him guessing. She's there to build something stable in a world where inconsistency is common and emotional games are normalized. Steady behavior stands out. A man recognizes that someone who is consistent isn't trying to control him or manipulate his emotions. She's simply being real, and that realness builds trust. Trust builds safety, and safety is what allows a man to finally decide without confusion or fear that she is the one. A man decides she is the one when he realizes she adds value to his life instead of pressure, and this understanding changes how he views the relationship entirely. Pressure feels like constant expectations, unspoken demands, and the sense that no matter what he does, it's never enough. Many men experience relationships as something that weighs them down rather than lifts them up. Over time, that pressure teaches a man to pull away emotionally, not because he doesn't care, but because he feels like he's failing in a role he never fully agreed to play. When a woman adds value, the experience is completely different. Her presence enhances his life rather than complicates it. She doesn't rush him, compare him, or constantly remind him of what he should be doing. Instead, she respects his pace and understands that growth takes time. This respect allows him to breathe. It gives him space to become better without feeling pushed. And that space is where genuine commitment begins to grow. Value shows up in the way she supports his purpose. She doesn't compete with his goals or see them as a threat to the relationship. She understands that a man's sense of identity is closely tied to his progress and direction in life. When she encourages him instead of doubting him, he feels understood. That understanding creates a deep emotional bond because it tells him she's not just there for the results, but for the journey. A woman who adds value also brings emotional intelligence into the relationship. She knows when to speak and when to listen. She doesn't escalate every disagreement into a crisis. She chooses communication over control. This maturity allows a man to engage without fear of things spiraling out of control. He learns that being honest won't lead to punishment or emotional withdrawal. That freedom to be real is invaluable. As time passes, he starts noticing the difference between her and others. With her, life feels more organized, more focused, and more meaningful. She inspires him to think clearer, act better, and move forward with confidence. Not because she forces him to, but because her presence naturally brings out a stronger version of him. That's when he understands that she's not draining his energy. She's multiplying it. A man decides she is the one when he realizes that loving her doesn't cost him his peace, his dreams, or his sense of self. Instead, it enhances all three. He sees that she's an asset, not a burden. And once a man recognizes someone as an asset in his life, he doesn't treat her as optional. He protects her, values her, and chooses her, not out of obligation, but because life genuinely feels better with her in it. A man decides she is the one when her absence changes him more than her presence ever did, and this realization often comes quietly without warning. While she was there, her love felt natural, almost effortless. Her care became familiar, and like many things that are constant, it was easy for him to underestimate its impact. He didn't fully notice how much emotional balance she brought into his life because it blended so smoothly into his daily routine. It wasn't loud, it wasn't demanding, it was simply there. When that presence is removed, everything feels different. The silence hits harder than expected. The days feel longer. The small moments where she once existed now feel empty. He starts noticing how often he thinks about her without meaning to. Her absence exposes what her presence was doing all along. It wasn't just companionship, it was grounding him. A man begins to reflect during absence. Without her influence, his mind has more space to wander, and that's when truth shows up. He realizes she was the one person who understood his moods without interrogation, who gave support without making him feel weak, and who stayed consistent without asking for constant reassurance. He notices that life doesn't feel as smooth anymore. The emotional stability he once had is missing, and now he understands its value. Absence also removes distractions. Without her there to soften the edges of his day, frustrations feel heavier, stress hits harder, victories feel less meaningful because there's no one he wants to share them with. In the same way, he starts recognizing that she wasn't just part of his life. She was part of his emotional system. She helped regulate him in ways he never consciously acknowledged. This realization can be uncomfortable. It forces him to confront the fact that he may have taken her for granted, that he assumed she would always be there, always understanding, always patient. Now without her, he understands that what she offered wasn't common. It was rare, and rare things once lost become unforgettable. A man decides she is the one when he understands that her absence doesn't bring relief. It brings awareness. He doesn't feel freer without her. He feels incomplete. The freedom he thought he wanted now feels hollow. And in that emotional contrast, clarity appears. He sees that her presence made him calmer, stronger, and more centered. When a man reaches this point, the decision is no longer about desire or attraction. It's about recognition. He recognizes the depth of what he lost and the value of what she gave without demanding credit. Her absence taught him what her presence meant. And once a man learns that lesson, it stays with him, shaping how he views her. Love and commitment from that moment forward. A man decides she is the one when he sees a future with her without being pushed to imagine it. And this kind of clarity is powerful because it comes naturally, not under pressure. Men resist being forced into visualizing the future, especially when it feels like a test or a demand. The moment the future becomes a topic filled with tension, timelines, and expectations, a man's instinct is to retreat, not because he doesn't care, but because he feels cornered into making promises before he's emotionally ready. When the vision of a future appears on its own, it feels completely different. He starts seeing her in moments he didn't plan for, He imagines everyday life, not just special occasions. He thinks about how she would fit into his routine, his challenges, his growth, and even his failures. These thoughts show up uninvited, and that's how he knows they're real. Nobody planted the idea in his mind. It formed there naturally. This realization often happens in quiet moments when he's making decisions and instinctively considers her. When he experiences something meaningful and feels the urge to share it with her first, when he thinks about where he wants to be in 5 or 10 years, and notices she's already part of that picture. This isn't fantasy. It's alignment. His life direction and her presence begin to move in the same direction. A man also notices that with her, the future doesn't feel overwhelming. It doesn't feel like responsibility stacked on top of responsibility. Instead, it feels manageable. He believes that facing life with her would make challenges easier, not harder. That belief is essential because men don't commit to futures that feel like burdens. They commit to futures that feel possible. Seeing a future with her also means he trusts her with his imperfections. He doesn't just imagine success with her, he imagines struggle too. He believes she would stand with him when things don't go as planned. That level of trust doesn't come from words. It comes from how she's shown up in the present. Her behavior today gives him confidence about tomorrow. A man decides she is the one when the future stops being something he avoids and becomes something he welcomes because she's in it. He doesn't feel rushed or pressured. He feels ready, and readiness changes everything. When a man is ready and the vision is clear, commitment doesn't feel like sacrifice. It feels like direction. A man decides she is the one when he chooses her only after he is ready, not when she is chasing him. And this truth is hard for many people to accept. A man's readiness has nothing to do with a woman's effort, beauty, loyalty, or patience. It has everything to do with where he is mentally and emotionally in his life. You can meet the right woman at the wrong time, and no matter how perfect she is, he will not be able to choose her fully. Readiness is internal. It cannot be negotiated, rushed, or forced. When a man isn't ready, chasing him creates pressure. Pressure makes him feel controlled, evaluated, and cornered. Even if he likes her, even if he enjoys her presence, the more he feels pursued, the more he pulls back, not because she lacks value, but because he hasn't decided who he wants to be yet. A man who is unsure of himself cannot be sure about anyone else. So he delays, hesitates, and stays emotionally half-present. When a woman stops chasing and focuses on her own life, something changes. Her energy shifts. She becomes less available, not in a manipulative way, but in a self-respecting way. She chooses her own growth, peace, and purpose. This is where clarity begins for a man who is approaching readiness. The absence of pressure gives him space to think, and space is where men process their truth. As he becomes ready, he starts seeing her differently, not as someone trying to convince him, but as someone who knows her worth. Her independence becomes attractive. Her calm confidence becomes noticeable. He realizes she isn't waiting around for him to decide she's living her life. That realization creates urgency, not panic, but awareness. He understands that choosing her is a privilege, not a guarantee. A ready man chooses deliberately. He doesn't stall. He doesn't keep options open. He doesn't need to be reminded of what he might lose. He sees clearly what's in front of him and makes a decision. This choice is calm, not chaotic. It's intentional, not reactive. He chooses her because he wants to, not because he's afraid of being alone. This is also when his behavior changes. He becomes consistent. He communicates clearly. He makes plans and follows through. He stops playing emotional games because he knows what he wants. A man who is ready doesn't confuse the woman he wants to keep. He creates security instead of uncertainty. The most important truth is this: a man choosing you when he is ready feels completely different from a man being chased into choosing. One feels solid and lasting. The other feels fragile and temporary. When a man is ready and he chooses you, you don't have to question his intentions. You don't have to decode his actions. His choice is evident in how he shows up. A man decides she is the one when the timing matches the connection, when his internal world aligns with what she offers. And when that alignment happens, the decision is effortless. He doesn't feel like he's giving something up. He feels like he's stepping into something that finally makes sense.